Hey guys, welcome back to the Danger Planet. This is Doug, and I'm here with Chris today. Say hi, Chris.
Hello, guys. Glad to be back.
Yeah, so Chris is actually one of the members of my old Pro Tour Magic the Gathering grinding teams. I've played a lot of Magic the Gathering with Chris. He's a really, really highly competitive player. He plays mostly in Legacy, Modern, but his favorite format, and always has been, is EDH. So he and I were actually talking and watching very closely as these Warhammer 40,000 spoilers were getting released for the new four different commander decks that were coming out. For folks not in the know, Warhammer and Games Workshop has partnered with Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro to develop and release a set of four EDH decks that are themed to different forces of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So there's one deck that covers the forces of the Imperium, which are the quote unquote good guys, the RUINOUS powers, which are the quote unquote bad guys and demons and evil sorcerers. Then there's the NECRON Dynasties deck, which are kind of like ancient Egyptian undead robot skeletons, I guess, for lack of a better term. And then the fourth deck is called TYRANID Swarm, and that's basically like the Zerg from StarCraft 2, if you're not familiar with it. So what Chris and I are going to do is we're basically going to break down all four of these different decks. We're going to talk a little bit about the general high-level overview of the strategy behind each of these decks and what a player might want to be doing when they pick up the deck and how they might want to try to use that deck to win a game. And then we're going to break down each individual unique card that's being released as a part of this release. So strap in and get ready, folks. It's going to be a heck of a time. So you ready, Chris?
I am ready. Let's go.
All right, let's do it. So the first deck is called Forces of the Imperium. So for folks not familiar with the 40K lore and coming in from the Magic the Gathering side and are just kind of trying to figure out what's going on here, effectively the Forces of the Imperium are the good guys. They're the humans. And they have a bunch of different factions that fall under the Imperium. Those are the Space Marines, the Sisters of Battle, the Inquisitors, the Abatis Mechanicus. So all of these different forces of humanity. Now the color pie is white, blue, black. So Chris, why don't you talk to us a little bit at a really high level here, how from a magic player standpoint, when you look at this Forces of the Imperium deck overall as kind of like a holistic EDH deck, how do you see this functioning? What do you see as important keywords or rules mechanics for somebody looking to pick up this deck and try it out?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So at a base level, like white, blue, and black are the removal control colors. You've got your great single target removal and Swords to Plowshares, which they've reprinted in this deck. You got your classic counter spells, your classic board wipes, your destroy target creatures, and this deck has a bunch of those effects. What this deck is also trying to do is sort of build up a swarm of artifact synergies, either artifact tokens, creature tokens, tokens of all sorts, and then using like sort of drain effects like Blood Artist, or some of the other ones that they include in this deck.
Oh,
Kill
is
your
Blood
opponents.
Artist in this deck?
It is not. That would have been a sick reprint for this deck.
That's a spicy include for sure. That's a card we're gonna definitely encourage folks to pick up and put in this deck.
Yeah,
I would imagine.
but like if you like hover over Assault Intercessor,
Yeah.
like just nickel and dime your opponents. Something happens, oh, your opponents take 2. Oh, one of your creatures dies, your opponents take 1. Something else happens, oh, you draw a card. And then sort of accrue, advantage over time with each little step, each turn, each phase, and then eventually launch a haymaker that ends the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like ping him for a bunch of drain damage and then punch him real hard with like a commander or something like that.
Yeah,
Basically.
I mean, like if you look at the face commander, the ability there reads, 1 tap target creature opponent controls, investigate. And then investigate basically is draw a card. So you're drawing 2 cards a turn. If you could double up on the clue tokens, that's more, more card draw. If you have artifact synergies, you get things on that end too. And
So
then
you see this as a grindy, value-oriented control deck that's looking to get residual ping damage or value out of itself until it gets to the point where it can like finish off an opponent, basically. Is that fair to say?
yeah, definitely
Okay.
a value-oriented deck. If you scroll down to Marnius Calgar,
Yes, absolutely.
so Wizards has recently, for I don't know when they started, but
Where is he?
each commander deck usually includes a face commander, which in this deck is Inquisitor Greyfax, but they also include a couple alternate commanders that have the same color identity, and you can just replace. And Marnius Calgar is sort of like my pick for what you should helm this deck with. Just because if you look at that first ability, whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card.
Yeah, it's really good.
It is very easy to make a token enter the battlefield under your control. And if you do it multiple times a turn, that's multiple times you get to draw a card. If you can do it on your opponent's turn, even better.
Yeah, yeah. I think the ability to just cantrip and draw cards, so powerful, obviously.
Yeah.
It's funny that you call out Magnus Calgar as the other like kind of key leader here. In the lore, Inquisitor Greyfax plays a really critical role in resurrecting Marnius Calgar. So this guy was dead in the lore, and then they bring him back to life and make him into a super soldier variant of a Space Marine, which obviously Space Marines are like already super soldiers, but they make him into a super soldier. And the guy responsible for all of that cybernetic engineering is actually Blasarius Call. So he's this like cyber augmented technomancer that's like piecing together super soldiers. So it's really funny how they've done a really good job telling this narrative. And even someone like you who's just looking at this from a rules standpoint immediately picked up on the Inquisitor Greyfax Marnius Calgar connection, because I was going to bring that up as like a talking point, and it's hilarious that it just like comes across as that. So I mean, I guess that's them doing a really good job with the lore components of this. I don't want to spend like a million hours on every one of these new cards, but looking at it from a deck construction standpoint, what are maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of the new cards that you really like? And then why don't you go over how you see them being important? And then I'll give the Magic players watching a little bit of background on the 40K kind of components of the card. So if you had to start with a card that wasn't Magnus Calgar or wasn't Greyfax, where would you
so let's look at Bastion Protector, which isn't. This is a good card. It's probably reasonable in the deck, but where it's really going to shine is. Let me take a quick look. So things like if you look at Arco Flagellant.
Yep.
So this squad ability, additional cost to pay this to cast a spell. You pay 2 any number of times. Then when it enters the battlefield, you create that many tokens that are copies of it. So on its face, it's like, oh, you pay 2 mana, you get an extra creature. But to sort of break this, these are tokens. And because they're copies of Arco Flagellant, they'll also have its mana cost. So, for example, they'll contribute to things like Devotion. If you have like sorts of any sort of token doubler, what's that mono white one from Kaladesh? Not Kaladesh, Amonkhet.
I know what you're talking about. I just don't know the name of it. The enchantment.
Yeah,
basically. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I just don't know the enchantment.
The white parallel lives.
We'll look at we'll look it up and put it in post. The magic of editing. It'll be on the screen. It'll be on the screen in front of the folks as they're seeing us talk and not know what the name is. But yeah, I agree with you. I know
it doubles tokens, and your tokens are 3/1 potentially indestructibles.
Yeah, because you can just trigger 3 life to get it indestructible until end of turn, and you can do that because it doesn't cost mana. You can do that on any number of Arco Flagellants, basically.
Yep. Looking also Commissar Severina Rain.
Yeah.
You can sort of this could be a more sort of token aggro based strategy where you build up, make 15, 20 tokens, and then you just attack and you drain the table at once.
Yeah. The funny thing is in the lore, so commissars they work for traditionally the Imperial Guard, which are like the soldiers of like the basic army infantry of the Imperium. So just like normal guys with las guns, which are just like the 40K equivalent of like an AR-15 basically. And their major role is to go around and shoot people that are deserters or dissenters. So Commissar Rain is really famous in the lore because she had to execute this loved commander who refused to put his troops into an assault against chaos that he believed was suicide. So she like went up, shot him in the head, and then led them into the assault and then won the assault. So she's not like a very high power level character, but she's a very famous character in the 40k lore.
Yeah,
because she was involved in like
cool.
big
Like
concept.
that's like very clearly the lore tie-in to like. So they have ability keywords, summary, execution. There's no rules meaning. It's just a little bit of flavor text, and that's probably very clearly what they're calling out with that ability.
Exactly. Yeah.
You sacrifice one of your other creatures and you gain an advantage.
Yeah.
And notably about this ability, it's only colorless mana, which it's a lot in a lot of combos revolve around producing infinite colorless mana, and then feeding that into something to win the game.
Yeah.
This is an example where if you have infinite colorless mana and a way to make tokens, with colorless mana, then you can draw your deck, and winning is usually trivial from there.
Yeah, once you've drawn like 20 cards and have like infinite uncolored mana, like winning games of EDH is not that hard.
And even if you're not going infinite, like 2 sacrifice a creature, draw a card is like that's like a pretty good rate. Like throw away like your random 1/1 human token, draw a card.
It's a really solid engine card.
Yeah,
I agree.
Absolutely.
Anything else stands out to you here?
Down at the bottom, Ultramarines Honor Guard.
These boys?
Yeah. This is another instance of that squad keyword. And this one, you maybe get a little bit better return on your value, especially if you can double up the tokens with something like Anointed Procession, where each one serves as a lord effect for your creature. So for 6 mana, you're giving your entire board +2/+2. For 8 mana, +3/+3. And it's sort of resilient to spot removal because it's spread out across 3 creatures.
Yeah, and lords are always good. I mean, I don't know EDH as well as you know EDH, but just I know lords are good in modern and legacy for sure. In the lore, the honor guard are the specialist boys. They're the oldest, most veteran, most well-armored Space Marine units. And it very specifically, Ultramarines Honor Guard are the cream of the Honor Guard crop, the cream of the Space Marine veterans, and often directly report to or serve Malnias Calgar, who is the chapter master of the Ultramarines, who was resurrected by Blasarius Call's technological nonsense, effectively. So that's kind of how, again, this is all very steeped in Warhammer 40,000 lore. And listening to you talk about these game mechanics, it's actually really interesting because it seems like a lot of time and thought went into trying to kind of make these guys have a cohesive strategy around them. I guess let's do one more card that you really like as a call out, and then we'll move on over to the RUINOUS powers.
Let's take a look at Triumph of St. Catherine and go in a little bit of a different direction.
Okay.
T at the bottom.
Is that
it's a creature.
Oh, okay, one second. Boom, boom, boom. Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. Yep. So why do you like Triumph of St. Catherine?
So this is not a card that I think is going to be a standout in EDH. It's a 5/5 and it comes back a couple of turns later. However, I have seen some buzz that like maybe this gets played as a one-of in like Legacy Death and Taxes, because when it dies, it's going to come back eventually, and it's a 5/5, and you get to miracle it for 2.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Like you're on the draw against your Death and Taxes opponent. On turn 3, they've got 2 lands in play. They untap, they cast a 5/5. It's out of lightning bolt range. You can't prismatic ending it. If you don't have Swords to Plowshares, you're going to be dead pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's a 5/5 with lifelink that you can cast effectively for 2. So it's really good anti-aggro. Oh, and also for the viewers at home, give a very high level of it's basically mono white weenie that you're talking about.
Mono white weenie, a lot of sort of disruptive effects that say like, oh, because Legacy is the format that's known for I'm gonna do a bunch of powerful things with spells, and then kill you with the value. And Death and Taxes sort of tries and upends that and says, well, while you're trying to sit there assembling your engines and drawing your cards, I'm just gonna beat your face in.
Yeah.
Another important thing to note is that Legacy is the home of the card Brainstorm,
Oh
which
yeah.
reads, draw 3 cards, put 2 back on top of your library. And that has previously been used to great effect with cards like Terminus, which are a miracle board wipe. But you could maybe see some, like, maybe a blue-white deck, maybe a 3-color deck.
Or humans.
Yeah.
Maybe you could play this in humans with splashing and brainstorm. Maybe that's a little greedy. Does humans in Legacy run brainstorm? It probably doesn't, right?
Probably not, because they probably want to run a lot of those creature type lands that that only produce mana for creatures.
Yeah, rainbow. There's like 4 of those that rainbow tap or whatever human you need. Yeah.
Like Cavern of Souls being the most notable, but there's a bunch of others.
Yeah.
But you know, like maybe like a, I don't know, like as a 1-up against, like, if Burn becomes big, or maybe like Blue-Red Delver is a really big sort of threat. It's a top tier deck in Legacy at the moment.
And you can't pick this card up with a lightning bolt, which is nice. No. Right.
So maybe like Jeskai Control plays one of these. They brainstorm, and now on the first couple of turns, they have a 5/5 with lifelink. You know, like maybe it gets checked by a Murktide Regent, but it still probably buys a lot of time, and they're playing Brainstorm anyways.
Yeah. So from a lore perspective, the Triumph of St. Catherine is actually the remains of St. Catherine, who was this really powerful Sisters of Battle leader. And the Triumph of St. Catherine is actually a procession of, like, holy folks carrying around these super powered religious bones of a once dead great leader. And in the game, Sisters of Battle have what's called miracle dice. And they're like a very holy, people call them nuns with guns, basically. And so this is one of your leader units that you can take in the game. And she adds in additional miracle dice effects and different effects to do various on the battlefield acts of holy divinity, effectively. So
if in 40K this card, like, this unit generates miracle dice, I love even more that they gave this card the miracle keyword.
Yeah, that's why they did that. Yeah,
they certainly did it on purpose. And I wonder, there's a couple other cards in here with the miracle keyword that probably also generate miracle dice.
Yeah, any of the Sisters of Battle or Nuns with Guns units, they're going to be kind of a miracle dice, and holy acts of righteousness is like their jam, basically.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right, cool. I mean, that's a really good overview in general of kind of like the forces of the Imperium. So you ready to go to the Ruinous Powers of Chaos, I guess?
Sure.
All right.
Let's hop on over.
Yeah. So the Ruinous Powers of Chaos is black, blue, and red, what I would lovingly refer to as Grixis. It's one of my favorite color combinations, actually. And it's led by Abaddon the Despoiler. In the lore, Abaddon the Despoiler is the big bad evil guy who heads up all of the Warhammer 40,000 chaos nonsense, and is just kind of like the chosen of the 4 dark gods of chaos. Now, when Chris starts to talk through this deck, they've made a really interesting decision in that they've included Be'lakor, the Dark Master. Be'lakor was the first ever demon prince, the first ever chosen of the dark gods, and he exists in both Warhammer Fantasy or Age of Sigmar and in Warhammer 40,000, because effectively he's an eternal demon. His lore is that he is chosen by the dark gods but hates them, and he's kind of like a demon, whereas Abaddon refuses to become a demon but is also a chosen of the gods. And what you'll see as Chris goes through these different units is that there's units of each of the 4 gods in this deck. So kind of given that background, Chris, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what you see as the overarching theme of this particular deck, and then talk to us a little bit about Abaddon as well as Be'lakor and how you see playing each of those guys.
Yeah. So I think, like Grixis, as opposed to Esper, trades white for red. And it's still common in a lot of control strategies, but more from a more aggressive slant. Like, I'm going to control this game by, I'm going to lightning bolt your creature, and now you can't block my thing that draws me a card when I get to damage you. Instead of, I'm going to sit back and hold up mana and draw cards on your end step. So this is sort of takes steps in that vein with just a more aggressive slant. A lot of the creatures have haste or combat keywords or have other abilities that generate value. Abaddon himself gives your spells cascade.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it rewards you. The more damage you do to your opponent, the more spells you can cast that will have Cascade, which then we'll search. Well, basically, it'll go through your library and bring another spell with it. So you cast one spell and you get 2 spells to resolve. And the more damage you do, the more spells you can hit with his ability. The other face commander rewards
Be'lakor.
Yep.
Yeah, Be'lakor, the Dark Master. So he's like the demon versus the human.
Yeah, he's more of a demon tribal payoff. The more demons you have, the more cards you'll draw, and he also plays into the black sort of aspect of sacrificing something for power. You know, you see it very commonly in the black: sacrifice a creature, draw X cards effects, or here we have it as lose X life, draw X cards.
Yeah.
And then
which is very chaos themed, because basically in the lore, you have to give up your soul to one of the 4 chaos gods to get power from them.
And that makes total sense. Like it's a complete like flavor win, because like life is sort of, it can easily be construed as sort of like your soul in Magic. And then additionally, whenever another demon enters the battlefield under your control, he just shoots someone for damage equal to its power. This is a very strong effect.
Yeah. Because you can remove stuff on board effectively.
Yeah. Or you can kill your opponent, or you can destroy their commander, or whatever.
Yeah, I guess you just have free real estate to shoot damage wherever you feel like effectively.
Yeah, so. And demons are known for having some, decently, like demons get pretty beefy. So if you're throwing around 4, 5, 6 damage triggers, like this is gonna kill people pretty quickly.
Isn't there also a lot of demons in the game that have really strong ETB triggers? Like,
yeah.
Isn't there a card called RUINOUS Demon that comes in and lets you basically do a search trigger? It's like 5 mana or something. It's like a black demon.
Yeah. There's a 7 mana 6/6 flying demon. I forget its name, but it lets you demonic tutor when it enters the battlefield.
Yeah. Its ETB is a demonic tutor. Yeah. I know that there's a ton of different demons that they're all kind of pricey, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But they all have really strong abilities. So double dipping on an ETB trigger, or effectively getting 2 different strong ETB triggers seems really good to me.
Yeah.
At least.
How many demons are there in this?
Well, in this, I don't know, but
there are 17 demons in the deck. So it's a little less than 1/5, and they all have. Most of them have like 4+ power.
Yeah.
So you're gonna get some pretty good value out of this.
What I guess what are like 3 or 4 different cards that stand out to you here that you like, that you want to talk about? They don't have to be just creatures. They can also be, because it looks like they've got a couple of new instants and artifacts as well. Like I'm looking at Nurgle's Corruption, Kill, Maim, Burn,
Blood for the Blood God, and Kill, Maim, Burn. I don't really know I haven't really looked at what they do, but like just on the name alone, those cards seem cool.
Yeah, so Blood for the Blood God is the rallying cry, or I guess not rallying cry, the killing cry of the Khorne demon god. And Khorne is the god of aggression and violence and murder. Hence, Blood for the Blood God as their battle cry. So
and like, even as a non-40K player, like I've heard this like pop up in other aspects of like nerd culture. It's like a fairly pervasive piece of like 40K lore.
Yeah, just nerds yelling Blood for the Blood God before they do something. It's the Warhammer 40K equivalent of Hold My Beer if you're a Chaos player.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Oh, and Brainstorm is here. They have a copy of Brainstorm in this deck as well.
They even have a Brainstorm.
Just talking about that.
Yeah, how about that? But this card actually, now that I'm reading it, actually seems pretty good. Because it does cost 11 mana, but it 1 less for each creature that died this turn. Notably, not each creature you control, it's each creature total.
Yeah.
So you could very easily do something like board wipe and then cast this for 3 mana.
Yeah, exactly. Or cast it just after combat, like in an end step or a second, or like post combat main phase 2,
Yeah,
and
it's not that hard to have, a bunch of creatures die. And also it's an instant. So somebody else casts a board wipe and you get to do this.
Yeah. Which is gross. It's 8 damage to each opponent. And then discard your draw 8 cards. Yeah.
8 cards is a lot. If you can get this for 3 mana, that's like one-sided Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah, and you don't have to discard down until your end step, right? Until your cleanup phase.
Yep.
So you could do this theoretically. because it's an instant. Somebody goes, oh, some really messy main phase 2 combat step. All right, in response, pop off Blood for the Blood God for like 4 mana, draw 8 cards, deal 8 damage to you, go into my turn because it's still an instant, right?
Yep.
Draw another card, have a hand of 9 cards out of nowhere because all I had in my hand was maybe Blood for the Blood God and one other card, and then you get to spend all of those cards, and you don't have to discard anything if you spend at least 2 of those cards out of your 8 or 9 card hand.
Yeah.
Because then you're at your 7 threshold on your end step, effectively.
And especially at the time at the time of the game when board states are getting messy and people are casting sort of like their Wrath of Gods, their Damnations, like
yeah, you just hold on to this.
It's probably like pretty late in the game, so you probably don't have all that many cards in your hand anyways. Or if you do, they're cards that you haven't cast yet because they're not good enough. They weren't good enough to be worth the time to cast. So you don't mind getting rid of them to draw another 8 cards.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, what's your next pick for the Ruinous powers here?
Kill, Maim, Burn. I think is also just because
I'm sensing a trend here, Christopher.
Just a little tidbit of how it was cool. This is like has as many exclamation points in its name as have been released previously.
So Kill, Maim, Burn is another. I think this is a Karn Betrayer. It's another Khorne thing, as you would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of smacks to me like a powered up version of that 1 black, 1 red sorcery that lets you do non-targeted artifact destruction. It had that demon, that bull demon with the whips from Dominaria on it. This one is obviously more powerful. It's also more expensive. What's that card called? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, like Angrath?
Angrath's Wrath.
Oh yeah, Angrath's Rampage. Yeah.
Yeah. This strikes me as like a better, more expensive Angrath's Rampage, basically.
Yeah, this one is it costs more, but it does more.
And it's also an instant versus a sorcery.
And also it's named Kill, Maim, Burn.
Yeah, and also it's like it's got a much better name.
Like the name does not affect how strong the card is, but it makes me laugh and giggle and smile.
But internally it affects whether or not we put them into our cubes or decks, obviously.
Yeah, like if you kill someone with Kill, Maim, Burn,
you should get extra points. You should. I don't know how you get extra points in Commander, but it should be worth it for sure.
Yeah, like you're gonna tell that story. Like, oh yeah, like 6 weeks ago, I was playing with Jeff and I killed him with Kill, Maim, Burn
in response to his lethal combo going off or something. Yeah.
I maimed
Jeff,
his creature, I burned his artifact, and I killed him.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, why don't you pick a guy? Pick a creature.
Poxwalkers.
Okay, sure. One moment. Let me get there. Here we are. So in the lore, Poxwalkers are the kind of the equivalent of just like zombies. It actually they're tagged as zombies here, which is interesting. So they fall under the chaos god Nurgle, which is the god of decay and putridness and all things pussy and gross. Nurgle actually views himself as the god of life and stability, but that's in his internal view of himself. On the outside, all of his followers are like basically poxwalkers or pus demons, or like really gross nonsense. So why don't you give us the I'm looking at these now and I have a feeling on why you like these, but why don't you let the folks know kind of what stands out to you here?
So this I don't think is a spectacular commander card, just because in a 100-card deck you only have one of these, and it's not super impactful. I think this is going to be certainly tried in Legacy in things like Dredge or maybe some Grixis shenanigans or the Hollowvine decks because of its second ability. You mill over this card into your graveyard and you cast something from anywhere but your hand and you get it back for free. This could be you discard a Root Wallet to Madness and you cast this and you get it back. This could be you flash back a Cabal Therapy. Notably, you can cast this for 3 mana and then flash back the Cabal Therapy, sacrificing this, and it will see that. Because you pay the costs before you put it on the stack, so it'll be in the graveyard to see you have cast it from your graveyard, and it'll come back. Also relevant, Expressive Iteration. You cast a spell from exile, you get this back. There's a lot of potential to do some busted things, especially if you can put 4 of these in a deck. Yeah,
so this one, I when I was looking at these, because I was doing some prep for the episode tonight, and I looked at these and I was like, holy crap, this is just a constructed card.
Yeah.
Like all the other cards we've been talking about have been like, you play these in EDH, or you play them in a particular strategy, or you play them to a theme. Poxwalker's theme is, this is a great card and should be in hyper competitive constructed
People are
legacy
certainly
decks.
gonna put this in decks.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Another one, maybe like on the other end, Pink Horror.
Okay. So in the lore, if Poxwalkers are kind of like the little mini demons that go under Nurgle, the god of Nurgle, pink horrors and blue horrors, and I think there's one other type of horror, I think they're yellow or red horrors. These are the rank and file demon minions of Tzeentch, which is the god of change and manipulation. And Tzeentch is very much known for being like the weaver of fates. And so in the game, when horrors die, they actually split into multiplicative versions of lesser horrors. So I can't remember if it's a pink or a blue, but I think pink dies and creates blues, and then blues die and create yellows. And so every time you kill them, they kind of like like, have you ever seen that cartoon where it's like the Magic Apprentice with Minnie with the magic hat and the brooms keep splitting, and then he's like, oh fuck. Yeah, that's what happens here.
It's like the classic like Hydra type. You cut off one head, two more grow back, or like for the D&D players out there, the oozes tend to you hit them with an axe, and now you have two oozes instead of one.
Yeah, get fucked, right?
So this card is blue-red, or is it, which is a well-known sort of spell slinger storm combination. It's not legendary, so it can't be your commander. But if you're trying to do a bunch of things like cast a bunch of rituals, draw some cards, do some more things, this probably goes in that deck. Because whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, 2 damage to any target, it's not like there's a bunch of effects that say, cast an instant or sorcery, each opponent takes 1 damage. But any target lets it be both board control and like a win con. Like, great. You don't even need to storm off. You cast the Ponder, and you pick off someone's, like Mana Dork, just free value.
Like a Birds of Paradise, you just pop a Birds of Paradise for free, which like every green deck in Commander is going to have multiple versions of like 1 mana Dorks.
And there are just so many creatures that do a lot of things for low mana cost. Something like Archivist of Ogma. It's a 2 mana creature. Whenever an opponent searches your library, draw a card, gain 1 life. You kill this for free. There's a lot of cards that have only 2 toughness and would be susceptible to this.
He's also a demon, so he also has direct synergy with Balakor. So like you play him, he comes in, he deals 3, and then if you have a spell in your hand, he deals another 2, right?
So, there's also maybe like I don't know, but like there's maybe something like you sacrifice this with some token doublers, and then like you cast a spell, you deal 8 damage pings. So there's maybe something there. Like that seems a little deep for me, but people are gonna try it.
Yeah, people are certainly gonna try it. All right, is there anything else you want to highlight before we move on to the NECRON dynasties?
Not in particular. There's a lot of if you're a player who has been wanting to find a demon tribal commander, this is a good deck to pick up, because Bellicor just gives you that demon tribal payoff that you've wanted for so long, and a bunch of good demon cards to go with it.
Yeah, the one thing I do want to call out, I'm not sure how good he is in the actual game from an EDH perspective, but Mortarion is a demon Primarch, so he's like he's a big baddie in the world of 40k. He's a named character that everybody knows. He's the right-hand man of Nurgle, basically. So he's the demon Primarch of Nurgle. He only ever responds or has to be accountable to Nurgle himself. Everybody else can go swim in a pool of corrosive, gross, toxic goo as far as he's concerned. I just love that model, so I want to point it out. All right, cool. So let's jump to the Necrons. So for those that don't know, the Necrons are, for lack of a better term, undead Egyptian-styled metal skeleton boys. In the game, it looks like they're mono black with an artifact affinity, which plays very well to kind of the lore that they have in 40k. Now, the leader of the Necrons, the main man himself, is the Silent King. The Necrons as a background basically they used to be a race of humanoid type beings, and they basically were afflicted with a whole bunch of problems, let's say, and the Silent King made the decision to put his race of people into a great hibernation or a sleep, and he was doing this at through all of the different cETAN. Now, cETAN are things like the Shard of the Void Dragon or the Nightbringer. Those are two different cETAN that are in this deck, but there's also a couple of other cETAN as well, but they're effectively star gods, right? So the Silent King made a deal with a bunch of star gods to save his people and put them into a great hibernation. As part of that deal, they got transformed from humanoid beings, like flesh and blood, being very similar to a normal human, into metal skeleton boys that are undying and have had all of their minds wiped. The catch is that they all then went into a giant slumber and started to wake up 20, 30,000 years later, many of them having their personalities completely wiped from them. And so now they're just hordes of machine legion undead robot skeletons. The only exception is that some of the leaders, and we'll call some of those out, maintain their personality or their memories, and they're still all behest to these cETAN, which are the star gods that put them in that position to kind of go with. Sorry, that was a little more complex than Evil Chaos Boys or Imperium Boys, but now that we have the context, go ahead, take it away, Chris. Tell us about the mono black artifact nonsense that the Necron dynasties represent.
Yeah, so mono black is known for doing things with the graveyard when it's not doing the other thing of paying life to draw cards. And boy, does this deck do the things with the graveyard. There's a heavy sort of reanimator, self-mill, sort of synergy and theme. Like just looking at the face commander, you know, he mills 3 cards and then he brings something back from the graveyard to your hand, which is sort of some passive card advantages. Not great, but you know, it'll create some value. And they have a lot of. Sorry.
They have one other alternate too, which is Imhotep. In the lore, this guy's like the second most powerful after the Silent King, so it makes sense that he would be the other one.
There's also Treason the Infinite is also down there as another legendary creature.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of in the lore. There's a lot of different like captain boys from the Necrons, and these are the named ones that have a personality and have their own unique perspective. Like there's one other one as well, which is where is he?
Illuminor Xeras.
Yeah. So there's like a bunch. They're like the royalty. Think of them as like the Necron royalty that awakened and maintained their memories, whereas all of their other peons are just like mind wiped slaves that just do whatever they say.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So sorry, I cut off your train there. You were saying mono black artifact looping. You were on the Silent King.
Yeah, it's just sort of like they're looking for ways to use the graveyard to acquire value in some fashion, whether that's returning things from the graveyard to the battlefield, things that do have effects based on the number of things you have in your graveyard, or who knows. But I think that, sorry.
Which units stand, or which units are, I guess there's a bunch of actually pretty interesting artifacts here as well, which makes sense because it's a Necron deck.
Almost all of the creatures are artifacts themselves, which is going to make them a little bit weak to like artifact hate, but like the flavor is just on point there.
Yeah, 100% given what they are. If you had to pick, say, 3 cards to talk about that you really like new cards, what would you pick?
Treason the Infinite.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Treason. One moment.
Take a look at that one and see if you can figure out why I called that one out.
Prismatic Gallery, probably. Holy crap, that's crazy. Yeah, he's an expensive boy. He's 6 mana for sure. I'm not sure Death Touch matters that much.
Not really.
Yeah, but Prismatic Gallery is a hell of a drug. Holy shit.
There's another card, like it's similar to Necrotic Ooze. There's a Myrrh from like the Phyrexia block that has this ability. But cards have had this sort of similar, like, has all the activated abilities of, you know, X Zone previously, and they go infinite really easily.
Yep.
Something like Staff of Domination plus Gilded Lotus plus, you know, something else like infinite mana, draw your deck, win the game easily.
Yeah, and they've got. I'm looking at the artifacts that even just come pre-packaged in this
Yeah.
deck, and there's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of good ones.
Yeah, there's plenty that just have like, look at Luminor's Xerath.
Yes, I will go to Mr. Illuminor. Boop. So in the lore, this guy is like a mad scientist, and he runs around deconstructing biomass life to try to understand it better. So his model is actually just exactly like that picture. He's using this energy staff and like shooting a deconstruction beam at like a human, and he's just like absorbing their biomass. It's wild.
Yeah,
Luminar Xerath is a wild
like
dude.
really fitting with both like the Secrets of the Soul as the ability word, the effect, and the flavor text.
Yeah.
But sacrificing a creature to add mana, especially equal to its mana value, like that's a pretty strong ritual effect.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't know exactly what sort of nonsense can be done with it, but when you can do things like sack one of the expensive 6-drops. Like
you got a monolith, right? Necron monolith, 7 cost. What does this thing do? Flying indestructible, 7/7. Necron monolith attacks, mill 3.
It's just a generic beater.
Form.
It's gonna create some, a Necron swarm over time.
Yeah. And it's 7 mana. That's expensive.
Yeah, probably not going to be an all-star, but if you really want to keep, like, if you just love Necrons, maybe you just keep this.
It's a very so the monolith is a very like cornerstone Necron thing. It's where they'll like drop down onto the battlefield, and hundreds of thousands of Necrons will sprawl through the temporal gate that and just like onto the battlefield basically. So that's what they're used for in the lore. That's why it has the make dude ability basically.
Yep. Gotcha, that makes sense.
Do any of these new, so either the Ghost Arc, the Necron Monolith, the Night Scythe, the Res Orb, or the Scepter of Eternal Glory, those are all very, very thematic things in the Warhammer 40k universe. If you had to pick one of those to talk about, which stands out to you?
Scepter of Eternal Glory.
Okay, let's general that. All right, why do you like this?
So for a long time, probably like with the advent of like the original Commander Legends and like the partner ability, there's sort of been like higher powers of cEDH, of EDH, where people feel that like sort of monocolor decks can't really compete, and that like the best thing to be doing is like some 5-color value pile, or like Timna Thrasios, Timna Krark, whatever. But this card is a 4-mana rock, and the second ability is only useful if you're in like maybe a 1 or 2 color deck, and that's sort of, it's cool to see them like give something to like the lower color players
to try to give them some more power, like maybe get that 7 or 8 cost card out a turn or 2 earlier.
There's another older card, like Thran Dynamo is a 4 cost. It makes 3 colorless, which is good.
That's an EDH staple, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, for big mana decks, I would assume.
Certainly. It sees a reasonable amount of play, and if you're in like a 1 or 2 color deck, like you can play this too, and it's just better. Like it makes colored mana.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. I mean, anything you want to touch on before we go to probably my favorite? I'm the most excited to talk about this one, the Tyranid Swarm. Any other card or anything you want to call out just in general on the Necron?
Look at Out of the Tombs.
Okay. Is that a enchantment?
It's an enchantment.
It is. So yeah, what do you like about this one?
So people like, this is the second ability, where if you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, instead return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield if you can't lose the game. It's sort of similar to things like Thassa's Oracle or Laboratory Maniac, or like that 4-mana Jace, where you get a reward for your library being empty instead of losing the game. Yeah. And I can imagine there's something where like maybe this opens up a deck that like, because previously if you wanted to do a self-mill strategy, like you'd probably have to play blue so you could reanimate the Thassa's Oracle and win the game. Where now maybe this gives you a reason to not be in blue and be in some other color pairing, where you use this as your engine to reanimate, I don't know, some big dumb monster that does something. I'll leave it to people other than me to put the puzzle together, but you can also
do
your library is not hard.
You can also do counter juggling, so you can like take counters and put it onto this to like get it, pumping out stuff faster.
Yeah.
Because it's only a 3-cost enchantment, so you can do a lot of nonsense with
Yeah,
this.
and if you have a lot of like things that like care about being in your graveyard anyways, you can get some value out of the first ability on it too. And then as a sort of insurance mechanism, you have the second ability there.
Yeah, it's also really cool just looking at how these cards are called. Like when I was talking about the lore, biotransference, that was the process of them going from humanoid flesh and blood into soulless robots. And
That
then
makes sense.
out of tombs is obviously the awakening that happened tens of thousands of years later of the robot legions, effectively. And then the war in heaven is referring to the Cetan, which are those gods, and their relationship with the Silent King and overall the Necron people.
Yeah.
And then if you want to look at some Cetan, these are absurdly expensive, but in the game they're also tons of points.
I mean, these ones also do, like, they have a very powerful effect in Magic too. Like, that's why they're 7-8 mana. Look at that.
Yeah. The Nightbringer in the game is basically the Grim Reaper, effectively, of the Necron religion. And then the Void Dragon was one of the newer Cetan, or the newest Cetan they got released in 9th Ed Warhammer 40k. And he's all about like electricity and destroying vehicles and stuff like that in the rules. So
yeah,
but these guys
that makes sense. Like
really
like
expensive.
the ability like hoses. If you want to like do some like treasure loops, this guy's gonna become like a 30-30 real quick.
Yeah, real fast, and then just fly over and punch you and kill you.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So that is the Necron dynasties. So let's go over to the Tyranid swarm. So this one is a 3-color deck. It is green, blue, and red. What I would refer to in the olden days as Rug, but what has been rebranded by Wizards of the Coast as Teamer. Isn't that right, Chris?
Yep.
That's the new phraseology for this color pie piece. So in the lore, in the 40k lore, the Tyranids are really similar to kind of the Zerg in StarCraft 2 lore. In fact, actually, Blizzard Entertainment and Games Workshop got into a little bit of a legal spat many moons ago around this IP, because the Tyranids actually existed well before StarCraft was ever released. Warhammer 40,000 really started getting going in the late 80s. And so when StarCraft got released, Games Workshop was like, wait a second, this looks really similar. And what you might see is, as we go through some of these pictures, for folks not really up to speed in the 40k universe and are watching this video from a Magic standpoint, a lot of these monsters are going to look very similar to maybe a video game that you might have played in the past. But Chris, given that, and at a very high level, sorry, the other lore point that's important here is the Tyranid faction is really 2 sections. One of them is the hive monsters, the aliens, the bugs at large. And there is another section called the Gene Stealer cults. And the lore behind this is really cool and creepy and messed up. Basically, the Tyranids exist in space, and they float around trying to sniff out biomass. Biomass is effectively a world with life on it. And they go there and they destroy and absorb the biomass. And they use that biomass to then morph new monsters. So monsters based on the type of biomass that they're taking in might have different characteristic or traits. And then you get what's called different hive fleets. And these hive fleets are just these massive, like, living ships the size of countries or bigger. And they float around space, and then they just schmegel planets and then kill everything there and absorb it. Now, they have a kind of front runner force that are really messed up. They're hybrids. And often what will happen is they'll infect the living population of a planet to create gene stealer hybrids or Tyranid hybrids. And you'll see these in some of the units. And effectively what they are humanoids that have been infected with a Tyranid plant, and they morph and change slowly over time. Kind of like how in Call of Cthulhu lore, a deep one changes from a human into a fish person after being infected with it,
Mhm.
they change from a human into kind of a half Tyranid, half human hybrid thing. And often they will be the first wave of attack on their own planet. And then what happens is, as they're attacking their own planet, the Tyranids will come in, the hive fleets will come in from space, and then just start bombarding the planet with all these killer monster bugs. And that's kind of how they absorb planets, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Seems like similar to like sort of the Phyrexian like sort of invasion that's happening in like Dominaria, like in the current sets, and like also a little bit of like slivers, where
Yeah.
like, you know, one is not so scary, but you get a bunch of them, and then suddenly they all have 10 abilities, and you're dead real quick.
Yeah, the units that are like the hybrid units, you're gonna see it. It's like the Gene Stealer Locus is a Tyranid human. That's why these are Tyranid humans. They have the two.
Oh,
And then you can
they're
see,
double typed.
yeah. So see the Gene Stealer Locus.
Yep.
So that's a human who basically was given psychic abilities by the parasite inside of him and is slowly being transformed into a Tyranid.
Cool.
And you'll see that over and over again. So I mean, given that illustrious background and not at all creepy or gross nonsense that's going on with these boys, Chris, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the theme of the Tyranid deck at a high level?
Sure. So like Teamer or Rug is like very much a sort of known for being a creature color. And then depending on what commander you choose, it can go in a lot of different directions, just because the ability of green to sort of ramp and fix mana, blue to draw cards, lets you have a lot of flexibility. This deck takes it into a very popular theme, which is +1/+1 counters. A lot of the cards either generate counters themselves or from other things, or get paid off from using them. Like the commander himself, he comes back bigger each time, and he rewards you whenever a creature with a counter on it dies. And a lot of creatures in this deck, if you just look at that first aberrant,
Yeah, the
aberrant,
right
yeah, they have this Ravenous ability where they enter with X+1/+1 counters on it, and if it's 5 or more, you get to draw a card too. So that way, like if you're in the late game and you don't have anything else to spend your mana on, you get a big dude and you draw a card. And then it also, what I like is it creates sort of a decision point that can sort of help you sort of level up as players. Like, oh, do I want to wait a turn to cast this for X=5 card, or do I just want to make this? Do I need the body on the field now or the effect on the field now? And it'll be smaller and it won't draw me a card, but I get it a turn sooner. And sort of balancing that is going to be sort of key to playing this deck well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you can see also, this is another one. This is a Tyranid mutant. He's he's armed with a heavy power hammer, because in the lore, a lot of the people and humanoids they infect are like laborers. So they take up their mining tools a lot of the time, or whatever they have on hand, and just use it to beat the patriarchy to death with, effectively, of whatever that planet is.
And then let's take a look at the other commander, Magus Lucia Kane.
Yeah, okay. And so this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is a human that has been infected with a Tyranid parasite who has been given incredible high-level psychic powers. That is what a Magus is. A Magus is a very, very potent human hybrid psyker that often leads the ground forces of whatever planet has been slowly corrupted.
So this pays you off for counters in a different way, because a lot of the creatures in this deck have X's in their mana cost. This pays you off by, it gives you some mana to cast those types of things, and it doubles them. So if you cast a creature with X in its mana cost, you get 2 of them. If you activate an ability that costs X to activate, you get 2 of that ability.
Yeah. And it's a fork creature. It forks shit.
Yeah.
Just like
if you find the right creatures, it creates a copy. And like, as everyone knows, like doubling season, doubling anything
pretty good
has potential.
Yeah.
So especially if you throw in some other cards not like that aren't from the pre-con, like you can probably do some nuts things with this.
Yeah. There's a couple of hard and fast rules in Magic the Gathering. One of them is drawing cards is good, getting free copies of things is good, and dealing lots of direct damage that you don't have to pay resources for is good. Those statements generally always true.
Generating something for free is sort of how you win the game, and this generates a copy of whatever you spent mana on it to cast. You
Yeah.
spend 10 mana and cast your thing. Now you have 2 of that thing. So you effectively got a 20 mana turn.
It doesn't look like you can get. You'd still be held accountable for the legendary rule, so you couldn't
Correct.
get. Yeah. So if you had 2 legendaries come in, they'd both hit the table. Then you, as the active player, would have to choose. But could you juggle triggers? Like if they both had ETB triggers,
if they both had ETB, they both entered the battlefield. So
Yeah.
you would get 2 copies of that ETB trigger, but you'd only be able to keep 1 body.
Right, which is fine a lot of the time anyway, right?
Yeah, depending on the trigger. Sometimes if it's like deal X damage to your opponent,
Yeah.
you know, that could
really
okay, deal twice X damage to your opponent. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's really, really good. What else stands out to you here? What other cards you like?
So let's look at Nexos.
Okay. Is that a
It's a creature.
Yep. Another hybrid.
Yeah. Basic lands you control have tap, add 2 colorless. Spend this mana only on costs that contain X. This is a powerful effect. It turns effectively all of your basic lands into a painless ancient tomb, but only if you're going to cast some X spells or have X activated abilities. I don't know sort of what the strongest thing to do with is, but the power is there, and you gotta find a way to use it. You know,
you got.
Sorry, you were saying?
4. You got the Ravager.
Yeah.
You've got Spore Cyst. You got Termagant Swarm.
And
And
there's plenty of X creatures
Paragon
in the deck itself.
Yeah.
But
you're saying at a very high level, like the best things to do with X cost in the game, maybe.
Yeah, like if you're gonna only cast X spells, this sort of doubles your mana if you look at it, if you like squint at it a little bit.
Yeah.
Right, and it's not
really
hard
powerful.
to see why doubling your mana is pretty good. So yeah, I don't know what people try. Like maybe you could do like sort of monstrous tribal from like Theros, and make it cheaper to monstrosify like those creatures, or you know Hydra tribal, where Hydras are known for having like X's in their mana cost and entering with +1/+1 counters. Now they get to be twice as big, twice as fast.
Yeah. What's up? What's up next? What else do you like on there?
Hierophant Biotitan.
All right. The big boy in the lore, the Biotitans. So there's this concept of Night Titans and Titans, which are effectively just giant Gundams that are piloted by both the Imperials and the powers of chaos. They have these giant mecha, effectively, like massive, the size of like 100 stories tall skyscrapers, basically. And this big boy is the Tyranids equivalent of that. So this guy is this massive Biotitan. So he's this huge fucking monstrosity that comes in and is what the Tyranids use to battle those giant robots, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And like the reason I'm picking this out is because that first ability lets you cast it effectively for maybe green if you have enough counters to remove.
Yeah.
So if you have if you pay green for a 12/12 Vigilance Reach Ward 2, can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, like
pretty good.
That ends the game pretty quickly.
Pretty good.
I don't know if there's the support to be able to cast this efficiently in Legacy, but if a deck can find a way to get this out on turn 2 or turn 3, like maybe there's something there. And if it doesn't exist there, like even in Commander, like
in Legacy, it feels like they swords it, you gain 12 life, the game moves on, right?
Yeah, and they have to pay 3 mana for that sword.
It has ward 2, yeah. So they might not even be able to do that. If you can get this out on turn 2, they may not be able to remove on turn 2 if they're like a control deck and they just straight up don't have the mana. Especially if you went first, you know.
It's something like people might try. I don't know if it's going to be good, but like like you can sort of squint at it and see like if the power comes together, like cheating things out for free,
is good. Yeah. Or for 2 mana. Yeah. And it also clearly plays into the counter synergy that the Swarm Lord is going after as well. So it gives you a payoff for it. The interesting part is that I do think you're right. I think this card is the most powerful when it's played super early.
Yep.
So to make this card really effective, you've basically kind of got to finagle a way to really quickly get those counters on it and rip them off, because this guy's going to be the best on turns 2, 3, 4, 5 of the game. Probably 2, 3, 4.
Like 5 +1/+1 counters is all you need to have in order to make him cost green. That's definitely not going to be difficult in Commander.
No. Yeah. There's shitloads of decks that exist that
absolutely
their job is to make counters.
Put +1/+1 counters on the entire team. Like any one of these things, creatures where you cast for Ravenous, where X equals 5 and comes in with 5 counters. You know.
Yeah. And you can't chump block him, which is nice. You can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less.
He can be chump blocked, but it's got to be something with like power 3 or greater, and that's like it's hard to create like 3 power tokens at a massive scale. He's not going to get blocked by, you know, a Llanowar Elves or a human token. It's going to be something more impactful.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, what else you got? What else you like here?
Toxicrene.
Okay, one moment. The names on all these monsters are wild.
Yeah. So the first 2 abilities are sort of just a little bit of flavor text, or not quite flavor text. They're relevant, but they're not as impactful as that second ability. I don't know what the best way to use this ability is, but it's certainly powerful. Turning off.
He's like a rainbow sliver. He's like a really big, angry rainbow sliver, right?
Read the second part of that sentence. Lose all other abilities.
Yeah. So like things like City of Traders, where normally would say when another land comes into play, sacrifice this land. You don't have to do that anymore.
It also doesn't produce. It also doesn't produce 2 mana. So
yeah. I mean, it produces 1. Yeah. To be fair, yeah. But it produces color of whatever you want. I guess.
But like certain like, I don't know if there's maybe like something where you play like the Ravnica bounce lands for free without bouncing something, and then you sacrifice this, and now you have a bunch of soul lands, or whether you're using this to, turn off your opponent's, I don't know, Maze of Ith, their value lands, there's a lot of utility lands.
This guy seems really good in almost any green deck at all. Like it doesn't even feel like this needs to be in a Tyranid themed deck. Like any deck that's playing like a color wedge of 3 or more colors, any deck that has a color wedge of 3 or more colors and can build intelligently so that the lose other abilities is beneficial to you and not detrimental. And then it'll definitely schmagel some of your opponent's game plans because they're not going to expect their lands to lose all of their abilities. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you can turn off, like if somebody's relying on, some like utility lands to create tokens or draw cards, this turns it off.
Or even like key lands that are cornerstones of certain strategies, like Cabal Coffers, right? This just
exactly
fucks that over. Or
Cabal Coffers, Field of the Dead, Valakut. These are like high impact lands that are hugely nerfed by losing their abilities.
Yeah, and just having a Toxicrene in play. He's 4 mana in a green deck. You should be able to get him out turn 2 or 3, basically.
Yeah. And then maybe I've seen some rumblings of like maybe this finds a place in Legacy. Like 4 mana is a little expensive, but like
it's expensive.
4 mana shut off the lands deck.
Maybe out of the board from a deck that can get it out on turn.
Or also
2 or 3. Like what about in an elf deck? Like an elf deck can just ram this out super fast, and it could be like anti-lands tech in Legacy.
Yeah, and also, but it's also a little bit dangerous because what's that Mara Lage land?
Is it the thing where he's like trapped under ice and then you remove the ice counter? Yeah.
Oh, Dark Depths.
Dark Depths. We should know that. Jeez, I should know that on recall, given that I'm a Legacy player.
So if Toxicrene is in play and you play Dark Depths, it enters with no counters on it, similar to like a Blood Moon effect or a Blood Sun.
So you just get a 20/20 for free.
Well, then once you don't, because it loses the sacrifice ability.
It loses the sacrifice ability.
But if you go like play Toxicrene, play Dark Depths, sacrifice Toxicrene to Cabal Therapy, now you get the 20/20 for free without needing, so you can use it offensively too or defensively.
Yeah. When I look at this, I see it as a defensive bring in from the sideboard hoser in any deck that can get it out quickly. That's what my brain thinks of. It also passes the lightning bolt test, which is great because it's a 2/4 instead of a 2/3. So lightning bolts can't kill it, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's prismatic ending too.
Yeah, it still will die, but any creature will die. So
relevantly, it does like the 2/4 body with reach is also not irrelevant.
Because it blocks Delvers.
It blocks Delver and Dragon's Rage Channeler and Murktide.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
I mean, like to be like there are things like I'd have to like look and see if there are other things, but there actually probably isn't all that much for cheaper that like both survives Bolt and either like trades with Murktide and blocks Delver and Channeler.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Um,
All right, you got one more pick on this one,
One more
and then
pick. What do we want to do here?
closing thoughts of spicy cards that you could add into any of these decks to make them good or
Let's
better.
look at probably one of the more sort of like obviously powerful cards. If you look at Clamavus.
Yeah, sure. One sec. There you go. Each creature. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty good. He's expensive. I mean, he's 5 mana for a 3/3.
But basically, you get all your +1/+1 counters are +2/+2.
Yeah.
You know, very obviously powerful.
Yep, just literally doubles the core effect and game plan of what the Tyranids are trying to do if you're a Swarm Lord player or trying to stack counters effectively.
Exactly.
It's really good. And you and you just play it and it just immediately has the effect. The one thing is that he's 5 mana on a 3/3 body, so he's very fragile.
Yeah, you want to play this and probably like just have like, oh, I didn't have lethal. Oops, now I do.
Yeah, oops, look at that. Now you're dead. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, not give your opponents time to, kill him.
Yeah, yeah. And it's cool. He's a propagandist. He's spouting the Tyranid propaganda to the unmutated masses.
Oh yeah, that is what he's doing in the flavor text there.
Yeah, he's a propaganda hybrid. So he's running around with like a Vox caster and being like, "Your human masters are the worst," which like in the Imperium they are also the worst, but so are the Tyranids. So,
Cool.
So that's a really high level overview, guys, of the forces of the Imperium, RUINOUS powers, NECRON dynasties, and the Tyranid swarm. Again, these are going to be 4 distinct pre-constructed EDH decks that are going to have a bunch of new cards in each deck. They're not coming in boosters, so they're boxes of decks that you buy that are pre-made. And they're going to have 2 variants. There's a normal variant that's going to be released, and there's going to be a collector's edition variant. So each one of these boxes, Forces of the Imperium, RUINOUS Powers, NECRON Dynasties, and Tyranid Swarm, are going to have the normal version and the fancy smanchy version. Is it worth it to get the fancy smanchy version? Chris and I can't answer that question for you. That's something you have to look deep into your heart and answer for yourself.
And deep into your wallet.
Yeah, deep into your wallet and your heart, basically. I guess I really want to say a huge thank you to Chris for coming on. You guys are going to see a lot more of Chris. He is our resident Magic the Gathering guru. Like I said, he and I have been teammates in competitive Magic now for many, many years. I mean, almost 6 years at this point, right, Chris?
No, more than that.
More, maybe almost a decade, honestly.
A decade, probably.
Yeah, you had to deal with me for almost 10 years. Sorry about that, Chris.
I mean, it's worked out pretty great for me, man.
Yeah, it's fair. So let us know what you guys think. We are going to be doing very regular episodes like this whenever a set drops. So you'll see kind of a back and forth analysis where Chris and I will talk about what we think is going to be good for an upcoming set, how we think cards might slot into the formats that we play. So for us, that's kind of, it would be either standard or pioneer or modern or legacy or EDH. Those are the formats that Chris and I are most interested in, and quite frankly, the ones that we want to make content about. So that's what you'll be seeing from us. I guess before we sign off, Chris, any just high level top picks that would be a reasonable card to purchase and slot into any of these decks for folks that are looking to get them? We're looking for recommendations in like the $5 to $25 price range. We're not looking for anything that's a $700 card.
Yeah, like it's easy to say, oh, Mana Crypt makes these decks all better, but like not everybody has $200. Like definitely like some of those like Blood Artist effects in, what was that first deck we looked at?
Oh yeah, Forces of the Imperium. So the Blood Artist effect. Do you want to go over at a very high level what Blood Artist does? And as you're doing that, I will track down the Assault Intercessor and put that on screen.
Yeah, so like Blood Artist, and there are more that like whenever a creature dies or a creature you control dies, target opponent or each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life.
Yeah.
Just payoffs for your creatures dying. And if you can create a lot of tokens and you're sacrificing them or they die somehow, eventually those little sort of drains will add up.
Yeah, and you'll stack it. So instead of doing a drain for 2 life, you might drain for 4 life every time. And if you're draining someone for 3 or 4 life every time, it's not going to take a lot of creatures dying to kind of just kill off players, basically. That's a
Yeah.
really good call. I think that's probably the premier slot in for the Forces of the Imperium deck, is because there's also another card like Blood Artist that's very similar, so you can get like two slots in.
There's tons of that effect. There's a couple at 2 mana, some more at 3 mana. There's it depends on how cheap you want the effect and how much you care about the body.
Yeah, that's a really good call out for the Forces of the Imperium. What would you say for, given the demon kind of theme with either Abaddon or Be'lakor? What's a really good, reasonable card that you could add into this Crixus pile to make it better? I'm thinking of one, and it's the lowest hanging fruit of all time. It's just straight up Lightning Bolt. Put Lightning Bolt in this deck.
Is Lightning Bolt not in this deck?
I don't think so. I'm looking at it.
It's like Lightning Bolt, like Lightning Bolt is a very solid, good card, but it's just not very exciting to put in like a pre-con product.
No, it's just a good card.
Yeah.
You're totally right. It's just actually just a good mana efficient card.
It kills most of like the relevant things in the format.
Why don't you give a more fun answer? Like maybe a demon, like a demon that you really like that has a good ETB that somebody could go and get.
What is it? Rakdos, the OG Rakdos.
Oh, the 4 mana one, or the 3 mana?
The 4 mana one was the second one. Like the OG one is like 7 mana.
What does it do?
Hang on, let me get this text for you.
Yeah, sure. Look it up. I have no idea what the OG Rakdos does.
Rakdos the Defiler, 6 mana, 2 black, red. 7/6 flying trample. Whenever Rakdos the Defiler attacks, sacrifice half the non-demon permanents you control, rounded up. Whenever Rakdos deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifice half of the non-demon permanents he or she controls, rounded up.
Nice. That's gross. And he's 7 mana.
6 mana.
They have Dark Writ in this deck, dude.
Yeah.
They give you a Dark Ritual. That's crazy.
Also, the Mana Rock suite in these decks has actually been pretty good.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and they all look like they all have a Soul Ring.
Like Soul Ring Triple Talisman is a good level of artifact ramp.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Even like Chromatic Lantern, like to fix all your mana. Worn Power Stone is a double rock. Like I think this is a higher level of mana ramp than most of like their precons have, which is like I'm excited to see that, because it means you spend fewer turns being like land dork, land pass, and you get to like the haymakers faster, and that's where the real fun is.
Yeah, you can play more big demon-y boys.
Exactly. And especially in a deck that's trying to cast these, 6-7 mana things.
Yeah, it lets you get them out on like turn 4 or 5 instead of 7 or 8. All right, so then the obvious question for the Necron Dynasties deck is, what are 1 or 2 general artifacts that you like including in this mono black artifact deck?
So if you want to build around Trazyn the Infinite, you could just find the pieces that go infinite with him and put those in the deck. If you want to build sort of a more grindy graveyard,
what are the Trazyn pieces you would recommend? So you can follow along.
Staff of Domination is probably an easy one, and then like a rock, like a Gilded Lotus, and then I think that's all you really need.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a Gilded Lotus would be a great addition. I think Staff of Domination was also super thematic. Not only like a good addition, also super thematic for the Necron deck.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't. What is it? Oh, I can't spell.
That's the one that has like 5 different activated abilities with a tap attached to it, and you can kind of do like whatever as long as you have mana.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one, it reads 1, untap it, which if the creature has that ability, it untaps the creature itself. So you pay 1 to untap Trazyn, and then
just go off and do whatever the fuck you want.
If you have a rock that produces 2 or more mana, you have infinite mana, and then you have infinite draw, infinite whatever.
Yeah, that seems pretty good to me.
A little bit more of like a grindy card, Marionette Master.
Ooh.
This is a 6 mana 1/3 with Fabricate 3, which if you weren't playing in Kaladesh block, basically you choose whether it enters with 3+1/+1 counters or creates 3 servo tokens. And this card is cool because there's payoffs to doing both. The rest of the text is, whenever an artifact you control is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. So if you don't have much of a board state, you create 3 servo tokens, and it's just sort of a Blood Artist effect for artifacts because it's only got 1 power.
Which is great in a deck that jams itself filled with artifacts and loops stuff.
Yeah, and if you have a board state, you put the counters on it, now it's 4 power. You sacrifice an artifact, and opponent takes 4 life. Like that kills people real fast.
Yeah, when you start to get into like drains of like 3, 4, 5 damage at a chunk, I mean that's some serious damage at that
Especially
point.
because almost every creature in the deck is an artifact creature. You know, if you have a 4-power Marionette Master and somebody casts a board wipe and you've got 10 creatures on the battlefield, that's 40 life. Like that's like 40 life lost to hand out to somebody.
Yeah, I agree. So I have my pick for the Tyranid swarms. What would be one or two or or three spicy includes in this Rug Tyranid deck here, you think?
Maybe just some more like ramp pieces, because like it's cool that you get rewarded for drawing a card when X is 5 or more, but that means the spells you're casting are sort of going to be like 6, 7, 8 mana. So you want to make sure you can reliably cast those and get that payoff. Because if you're casting a lot of these cards for low values of X, maybe they're not super impressive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just something that'll, like, tale as old as time, mana efficient green ramp, right?
Yeah.
And what do they have? They don't have a ton here.
No, they don't. Like they have
Cultivate, they've got an Explorer, they've got a Cultivate, they've got an Explorer, they've got a Farseek, and they've got a Rampant Growth.
Yeah.
So they give you like 4.
They give you a little bit.
But it definitely could use a Birds of Paradise for sure. Like
Birds of Paradise, like this could be a good thing for like Thran Dynamo, because you have lots of ways to use a ton of colorless mana in these X costs.
Yeah, that makes sense. My pick, and it's simply for fluff, is Birthing Pod. How you gonna not have gonna not have a Birthing Pod in a monster deck with all these crazy different triggers and mana costs? You know what I mean? So
yeah, let's if you go up and sort it by mana value, we can like sort of check out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, you can
get, there's a lot of these different, they kind of the whole spectrum kind of, There's monstery boys going all the way up from 2 all the way to like fucking 7.
Yeah, most of it's at 3, 4, and they get a couple of 5s, some at 6, and then 12.
Yeah. Which is fine. I mean, I just love the idea of a Birthing Pod in a
it makes
deck.
so much sense. Like, sacrifice your thing that's gotten its value and go get another thing.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, we're gonna call it at that, guys. It's been just under an hour here, so we hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, Chris and I have been playing together for a really, really long time, so expect a whole much more out of us from a Magic the Gathering content. If you guys have any questions, if you think that we're totally stupid and all of our opinions are bad, yell at us in the comments, let us know. If you want to see other stuff from a Magic the Gathering standpoint, from a coverage perspective, let us know. Chris actually already has a really cool arena run that's been posted to the channel where he did 5-color YOLO at the very, very end of that was the very end of
Neon Dynasty.
Neon Dynasty, right? You did a 5-color Neon Dynasty run. It was really hilarious. Sky Turtles for days, baby. So yeah, check that stuff out, guys. We'd love you to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. We also have a Discord where we talk about all the different games that we play, including Magic the Gathering. And Chris and I are on there. Chris is a mod on the channel. So hope to see you guys for our next video. And remember to like and sub the Danger Plant. See you guys.
See ya.